Thank you, Dr. Bacik, for bringing to our attention the importance of realizing that traditional usul, as you put it, though usually for those of us who come more from a Sharia background, usul has a very specific meaning, and it deals more than anything else with usul al-fiqh and the usul in theories of interpretation, whether it's of the Quran or the Sunnah, which have different methods to it. But there's no doubt that traditional usuli approach has produced, whether it's in the 12th centuries, people like Ibn Khaldun, Ibn Rushd, Ibn Sina, and others, and in more modern times, people like Ahmad Abdu and other reformists, so that in a sense there's no incompatibility with this. I myself had the privilege of being a student and follower of Sheikh Muhammed Abu Zahra, particularly in the field of the Sharia and criminal law. And here was a very classical Azhari of the post-World War II era, who still had extraordinary modernistic views. So the notion of usul is not incompatible with having modernistic views. I somewhat, if you'll forgive me, but slightly disagree with you on this notion of boundaries. You know, the early Muslim society came out of Jahiliyyah, where boundaries were very important, and boundaries continued to be very important in the first sort of ummah in Medina. Boundaries continued to be important in traditional fiqh by dividing the world in Dar al-Silm and Dar al-Harb. So the notion of both security as well as territoriality was not only doctrinally important in the history of Islam, but also very significant in the political history of Islam, that was marked very, very, very significantly by internal political struggle and territorial fights that occurred over times. I think what is extraordinary is that what we have upon us is the impact of globalization on the Islamic Ummah. Globalization not only in terms of opening up means of communications, but globalization more than anything else, to come back to what you're saying, to create a sort of an amodern, atypical, networking, communicating type of social change that ideas can bring about. And yes, you're absolutely right. Change in Muslim society has historically been led by the scholar. But put a footnote there. The scholars have always had an interest in the outcome. They've had an interest either because it put them on the side of a certain political group, or it provided wealth for them. That's the way the ulamas for centuries have existed, and still they do now. Al-Azhar or Qum or Najaf are linked to the power establishments that fund them and that give them the support that they want. So yes, ulama led, but ulama led with the idea that the ulama's opinions have an impact on society. That monopoly is now being challenged by movements such as the Gülen movement, but also by a variety of other thinkers. Just think in modern terms of the impact of somebody like Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who moves from Egypt to Qatar and whose writings have a very significant influence. If you look at Qaradawi's recent enormous book on jihad, you will see a little bit of progress being made, certainly a rejection of the political, violent, indiscriminate theories that some of the jihadists offer, but yet, you know, the influence of his thinking on these movements is very important. So we're entering into truly an atypical way in which the Muslim world is about to be changed by these types of social transformations. Our next speaker is Muhammed Cetin, who is going to speak of the Gülen movement, civic engagement, efficacy, and success.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. Today I'm going to talk about measuring the efficacy of civic engagement with particular reference to Gülen movement. I'll start with a quick definition of civic engagement and a brief mention of reasons for concern about the current low levels of civic engagement in the United States. Then I will follow on the outline the key factors for successful civic engagement and an overview of how levels of how these are reflected in the Gülen movement. Finally, I will highlight the significance of the Gülen movement for other peaceful civil society movements. Perhaps the most widely used definition of civic engagement is that proposed by Thomas Ehrlich and colleagues. In quotes, civic engagement means working to make a difference in the civic life of our communities and developing combination of knowledge, skills, values, and motivation to make that difference. It means promoting the quality of life in a community through both political and non-political processes. A morally and civically responsible individual recognizes himself or herself as a member of larger social fabric and therefore considers social problems to be at least partly his or her own. Such an individual is willing to see the moral and civic dimensions of issues, to make and justify informed moral and civic judgments, and to take action when appropriate. End of the quote. This definition makes it immediately obvious how vital civic engagement is for improving and enhancing conditions in contemporary societies. This kind of empowerment was first developed mostly outside the university gates and beyond partisan politics. It helps foster citizens learning about not only democratic cultures, but also human rights. At the same time, it enhances citizens' commitment to civic engagement in multicultural and divided societies. This multicultural understanding crystallizes in learning through volunteers' experiences and community services to all. In addition, it brings socially responsible, apolitical leadership in intercultural and democratic dialogue and in peaceful social change. However, in recent years, social analysts have noted a fall in civic participation in common interest groups in North America. People have developed disdain for politics and become less likely to socialize in a face-to-face manner. Now, many organizations claim to educate citizens or to promote civic engagement or to care about diversity as a matter of access, equity, and quality. However, judging by the high level of crime, conflict, corruption, and violence in most of the industrialized democracies in the world, many organizations seem to offer little in the way of roadmap or leadership. Key terminology and goals remain confined to the intellectual or academic field. They lack resonance to galvanize a new generation of peaceful activists. So, what can be done about this decline? Well, there are key factors or characteristics that deepens citizen engagement in public life. First, important issues need to be identified by the public. Then, non-contentious, non-conflictual, non-coercive means must be used for developmental models for citizen civic learning, democracy building, respect for diversity and human rights, democratic dialogue, inclusiveness, political rights. Also, citizens must know their cultural and political rights, and individual willingness and initiative should be accompanied by organized mobilization for the common good. And lastly, the civic engagement needs to be supported by altruistic giving. Bearing these key factors in mind, let's turn to the Gülen movement and see how these factors contribute to its efficacy. By the way, here I must point out that measuring the success of a movement is an ambitious undertaking. First, there are no definite criteria, and there are a number of methodological difficulties. There are definitional and measurement problems around subjective and objective aspects, intended as well as unintended consequences of a movement's action, and types of outcomes. The second obstacle measuring success is the problem of causality. It is difficult to assess the extent to which a movement has contributed to producing a desired outcome, policy, or changes. The second obstacle measuring success is the problem of causality. It is difficult to assess the extent to which a movement has contributed to producing a desired outcome, policy, and changes. The outcomes may range from the level of individuals and organizations to the introduction of specific legislation or policies or change in the regime. Therefore, rather than trying to produce any ratio of cost-benefit, risk-advantage, spatio-temporal spread, we will define success here as a function of how clearly organizational goals are defined, how effectively a movement's available resources, people, material, ideas, are put to use to mobilize support, and to see that established institutions take the movement's aims seriously. We have said that the first factor is that important issues need to be identified by the public. So, how are issues identified, goals set in the Gülen movement? The movement is a complex collective actor composed of many social movement organizations pursuing similar goals but different strategies. Decisions on goals, that is, on what to do, are taken in a process of consultation locally or an individual project network. The consultative process means that no one owns the services and authority in the name of the collective actor, and that the Gülen movement guarantees its participants access to immediate and verifiable control of the goods and services organized through collective action. The movement as a whole benefits from this flexibility, adaptability, and immediacy. These features allow to be an effective channel for the direct expression of needs the state organizations, political organizations, and other more structured organizations cannot incorporate. In the service networks, there are no fixed procedures, formal leadership, or fixed structure of bureaucrats. The efficacy of decision-taking in the networks is explained by the constancy and the richness of interaction of many individuals, its being multi-scaled and across multiple affiliations. This makes the networks adaptive, spontaneous, self-organizing with representative leaders generated from the grassroots. The next important factor for success that I mentioned was that non-contentious, non-conflictual, and non-coercive means must be used for developmental models. In this aspect, the Gülen movement really excels. It diffuses a discourse of dialogue and tolerance and the valuing of diversity. It has never shown any inclination whatever towards violence or extra-legal tactics of any kind. It has shown itself to be able to absorb conflicting pressures and ease tension within fragmented communities. It has transformed the potential to use coercive means to induce changes in political changes into peaceful efforts to produce beneficial services. The third important factor was that citizens must know their cultural and political rights. Typically, networks are the basis on which movements are built, and they perform different kinds of functions. They teach people about the values of the movement. They reinforce social cohesion or solidarity. They exchange information and organize activities. Networks attract supporters or adherents who are more often more committed than those who have formal membership of political parties. As I have mentioned already, the Gülen movement consists of a series of networks, and within these networks, participants learn and exercise their cultural and political rights. The efficacy of the Gülen movement commitment is one of the results of participants' commitment to these networks. The fourth factor was that individual willingness or initiative should be accompanied by organized mobilization for the common good. All the social movement organizations and institutions in the Gülen movement are independent corporate bodies. They disperse news of their accomplishments through the mass media and promotions. In this way, ideas, thoughts that arise from a commitment to the same feelings are shared and owned by all. In the social movement organizations, for example, the educational institutions, hospitals, or the media, there are paid staff who are not active in the voluntary aspect of the movement's activities, but are nevertheless broadly sympathetic to its aims, and there are individuals from the grassroots of the movement who are pursuing a career in those social movement organizations. The social movement organizations of the Gülen movement are successful because of the interweaving of the service project mentality with integrative strategies. Also, what makes them leading institutions in their field inside and outside Turkey is that employment is based on specialized training on formal certification organized and issued by the states where they are based. Employment and advancement is in accordance with knowledge, achievement, and professional expertise and competence rather than seniority or preference given to friends or relatives. The movement has formed a large number of organizations operating across economic, political, and cultural boundaries. It circulates and diffuses ideas, information, new patterns of action, and cultures. In this way, it is able to transfer latency into visibility through collective action and services, which are then institutionalized. Through associational and relational service networks and through the media, the movement participants harmoniously integrate and liaise between its many layers, formally and informally, as the need arises and the use of participant skills is maximized. Last in the list of factors, we said to be successful, a movement needs to be supported by altruistic giving. Along with support from the grassroots for the services provided, it connects with and gains support from influential people such as community leaders and industrialists, as well as small businessmen. By employing a sound rationality through the obvious neutrality of technical expertise, the movement is able to appeal to all. Using this accommodative service solidarity, organizational skills, and the trust it has earned from the people for the benefit of the needy and the general good, the Gülen movement has been extraordinarily successful at convincing the public to use its constitutionally given rights to serve humanity positively, constructively, and through self-motivated philanthropic contributions and charitable trusts. For this reason, the Gülen movement has become, first, a vital component in providing an alternative, a barrier to egoistic interests at the expense of others, and a remedy for societal discord, conflict, and violence. And second, it has become one of the most significant and leading actors in the renewal process towards a civil, pluralist, democratic, and peaceful society. Evidence shows that the more closely the individual is integrated into a group, the greater will be the degree of his or her participation. Then, the more intense the collective participation in a network of relations, the more rapid and durable will be the mobilization of a movement or its social movement organizations. The Gülen movement facilitates and thus increases an individual's willingness to get involved in service projects through his/her relationship with larger, like-minded, similarly intentioned people. Disciplined participation and coordination of strategies for achieving the movement's aims are accomplished by constructing a formal organization. The movement becomes an organic part of society and crystallizes into a professional structure. Sources of the frames of reference and the resources for the movement are education, cultural experience and awareness, religious consciousness through knowledge and study, participation in social and communitarian representative bodies, responsibility and altruism, belief in societal accord, peace, democracy, and cooperation, as opposed to clash between civilizations. Enabling people to make better use of their resources, to free themselves from material and other inequalities, and to become reflexive and beneficial to others is achieved through prioritizing knowledge and education rather than party politics and partisanship. The movement has established the ideal balance between risks and advantages so that millions of people are taking part in service projects. By recognizing the outcomes of its actions, by securing positive recognition from others, movement participants compare and perceive its consistency and continuity over time and across borders. By comparing their investments with the results of their actions, movement participants relate the rewards to the resources invested in the action. In this way, the movement as a whole learns and develops. So finally, what is the Gülen movement's significance for others? What can it teach other civil society movements? The movement stresses the reality and the projects, not an actor or A or D actor. Starting from the present, it relates to the future, not to the world of fantasies. As the movement establishes itself here and now with projects, and as it establishes its location, consistency, commitment, and trust, the Gülen movement gives people hope for the future. It does not oppose the idea that people should retain their values while changing. The retention of values and maintaining permanence should not contradict continuity, progress, and advancement. This draws many people, individuals, into service projects. It says much of the Gülen movement's reflexivity and its success in weakening or removing barriers between people that it has received recognition from unexpected resources. It has enabled even those who have no part in its work to reflect on the segmentation or irrational polarization and rigid separation and closure between different collective entities, in particular Turkey. Earlier, I mentioned the concern in the United States at the pattern of declining civic participation. Just like the Gülen movement, universities have formed many initiatives and institutions to investigate how to develop models of civic learning and civic engagement. They aim to promote and coordinate volunteer opportunities, build partnerships within community, and prepare younger generations, students, and other individuals to be engaged in meaningful action as citizens in democracy. In becoming transnational and by dint of its dialogue activities, the Gülen movement has proved that there is plenty of common ground between different individuals, groups of people, and communities throughout the world. I feel that an understanding of the Gülen movement can help to reverse the kind of decline in civic engagement that we see in the United States and Europe. It can show activists and other civil society movements how to expand their repertoire of action for societal peace and inter-civilizational cooperation. Very diverse people can pull together to achieve very valuable goals. The Gülen movement has discovered this, reminds people of it, and acts on this simple truth. For this reason, I believe that in spite of opposition from groups that benefit from the conflicts between peoples, the Gülen movement will continue peacefully and successfully in the way it always has. Thank you.